They thought she was just a stranger passing by. But one act of kindness would change the life of the most powerful man in Naples forever. The rain had covered the old streets of Naples with a quiet silver glow as Naomi Carter walked home after another exhausting evening. The Black Maid was used to long days, quiet hallways, and people who often noticed her uniform before they noticed the person wearing it. But Naomi never allowed the way others saw her to change the way she treated the world. She believed every person deserved kindness, even when nobody was watching. As she passed a quiet corner near an old building, she noticed a young boy sitting alone beneath the streetlights. Many people walked by, too busy with their own lives to understand the fear and confusion in his eyes. Naomi stopped immediately. She did not know his name, his family, or where he came from. She only saw a child who needed someone to care. Slowly approaching so she would not frighten him, Naomi spoke with a gentle voice and asked if he was okay. The boy introduced himself as Ethan Park. His clothes showed he came from a wealthy background, but Naomi did not care about that. To her, he was not rich or important. He was simply a young boy who needed help finding his way back home. She stayed beside him, offered comfort, and made sure he felt safe while waiting for his family to arrive. During those quiet moments, Ethan felt something he had been missing for a long time. Someone was listening to him without treating him differently because of his last name. Across the city, Damien Park received the message that his nephew had been found. The Korean Mafia Boss with white skin and a tattoo on his neck was known throughout Naples as a man who rarely showed emotion. Years of responsibility had shaped him into someone careful, guarded, and difficult to impress. When Damien arrived and saw Naomi sitting calmly beside Ethan, he expected explanations, requests, or some hidden reason behind her kindness. Instead, he found a woman who was simply relieved that his nephew was safe. Damien looked at Naomi and asked why she stayed for a child she did not know. Her answer was simple. She said a person should not need a famous name or a powerful family before someone decides they matter. For the first time in years, Damien had no response. The man who understood influence and control could not understand a kindness that asked for nothing back. As Naomi prepared to leave, Ethan thanked her with a smile Damien had not seen in a long time. Watching her disappear into the rainy Naples night, Damien realized the woman he almost overlooked might understand something about strength that he had forgotten. The image of Naomi Carter walking away through the rainy streets stayed in Damien Park's mind long after that night ended. The Korean Mafia Boss with white skin and a tattoo on his neck returned to his mansion overlooking Naples, surrounded by everything most people believed represented success. The marble floors, the quiet rooms, and the expensive decorations all reflected power, but for the first time, Damien noticed how empty those spaces felt. He watched Ethan sleeping peacefully and realized that the boy had smiled more while talking about a stranger's kindness than he had in weeks inside a mansion filled with everything money could provide. Damien could not understand it. In his world, people usually approached him because they knew his reputation. They respected his position before they understood the person behind it. But Naomi was different. She had helped Ethan without knowing his family name, without knowing what doors that decision could open, and without expecting anything in return. The question followed Damien everywhere. Why would someone give so much kindness to a person who could offer nothing back? Days later, Damien arranged to meet Naomi again, not because he needed answers about that night, but because he wanted to understand the woman who challenged everything he believed. Naomi arrived with the same calm confidence she had carried before. She was not impressed by his mansion, his influence, or the attention surrounding him. She treated him with the same respect she would give anyone else. Damien asked if she realized who Ethan was when she helped him. Naomi simply smiled and said she only realized he was a child who needed someone to stop and listen. Her answer created another silence between them. Damien was used to complicated explanations, but Naomi's honesty was simple. Over time, Ethan continued asking about the woman who had helped him, and Damien noticed how much trust his nephew placed in her. Eventually, Naomi was invited to help inside the mansion, bringing her quiet kindness into a place that had forgotten how warmth felt. Some people saw only the Black Maid entering a world of wealth and influence, but Damien started seeing something more. He noticed how she remembered everyone's names, how she listened before speaking, and how she never changed herself to fit into someone else's expectations. The mansion that once echoed with silence slowly began to feel different. It was not because Naomi tried to transform it. It was because she brought humanity into every room she entered. Watching from a distance, Damien began to understand that the strongest people were not always the ones with the most power. Sometimes they were the ones who could remain kind in a world that forgot the value of kindness. Naomi Carter's presence inside the mansion slowly revealed a truth that Damien Park had ignored for years. The Korean Mafia boss with white skin and a tattoo on his neck had built a life where everything was carefully managed, but he had forgotten that a home needed more than order and protection. It needed warmth. The Black Maid entered that world without trying to impress anyone. She did not change her voice, her values, or the way she treated people simply because she was surrounded by wealth. Every morning, Naomi greeted the staff with kindness, listened to Ethan's stories, and brought a sense of peace into rooms that once felt distant and cold. Some visitors to the mansion only noticed her uniform and assumed they understood her place in the world. They did not see the patience behind her actions or the quiet confidence behind her smile. Naomi never responded with anger because she knew her worth was not something strangers could give or take away. Damien watched these moments carefully. At first, he was only curious about her. Then he became impressed by her. Eventually, he began learning from her. One afternoon, Damien found Naomi helping Ethan prepare a small project about family and gratitude. The boys spoke with excitement, laughing in a way Damien had not heard for a long time. For a moment, Damien stood silently by the doorway and realized that Naomi had given Ethan something he himself had struggled to provide. She gave him the feeling of being understood. Later that evening, Damien asked Naomi how she could remain so patient when the world was not always patient with her. Naomi looked toward the city lights of Naples and explained that she could not control how others treated her, but she could control whether she allowed those moments to change her heart. The simplicity of her answer stayed with him. Damien had spent years protecting himself by building emotional walls, while Naomi protected herself by holding on to who she was. They had faced life in completely different ways. As time passed, the mansion changed in ways nobody expected. Conversations became warmer. Ethan became happier. The staff felt respected instead of unnoticed. Damien began realizing that Naomi's influence did not come from demanding attention. It came from consistency, compassion, and the ability to make people feel valued. The woman some people underestimated had brought something into his life that power could never create. Standing alone in the quiet hallway one night, Damien understood that Naomi was not teaching him how to become stronger. She was showing him that real strength had always required kindness. The changes inside the mansion became impossible for Damien Park to ignore. The Korean Mafia boss with white skin and a tattoo on his neck had always believed that the world respected strength, success, and control. For years, he carried his responsibilities alone, thinking that keeping a distance from others was the only way to avoid disappointment. But Naomi Carter showed him a different path without ever asking him to follow it. The Black Maid never gave speeches about kindness or demanded that people recognize her value. She simply lived by her principles every single day. She treated the newest employee with the same respect she gave the most influential guest. She listened to Ethan's smallest worries as carefully as others listened to important decisions. She proved that dignity was not connected to how much someone owned, but to how someone chose to treat the people around them. One evening, the mansion hosted a formal gathering with several respected visitors from Naples. The rooms were filled with elegant conversations, but Damien noticed something he had never paid attention to before. Some guests greeted powerful people immediately, yet barely acknowledged the workers who made the evening possible. Naomi noticed too, but her expression never changed. She continued her work with grace and confidence because she did not need approval from people who only understood status. Damien watched her from across the room and felt something shift inside him. The woman Minnie overlooked was the same person who had brought happiness back to Ethan and warmth back into his home. Later that night, after everyone had left, Damien found Naomi quietly organizing the final details of the evening. He asked if it bothered her when people failed to see everything she contributed. Naomi looked at him calmly and said that a person's value was not smaller just because someone else failed to notice it. Those words stayed with Damien. He realized that for years, he had been trying to make the world respect him through his position, while Naomi earned respect simply by being herself. From that moment forward, Damien began changing the way he viewed everyone around him. He started recognizing quiet efforts, listening more deeply, and understanding that leadership was not about standing above others. It was about making sure others never felt invisible. The mansion slowly transformed because one person chose compassion over judgment. And for the first time in many years, Damien understood that the strongest hearts were often found in the people the world underestimated. The more Damien Park understood Naomi Carter's heart, the more he began to recognize the quiet battles people carried without showing them to the world. The Korean Mafia boss with white skin and a tattoo on his neck had spent years believing that hardship made people colder because that was the path he had followed. Every challenge in his life had convinced him to become more guarded, more careful, and more distant. But the Black Maid showed him another possibility. Naomi had experienced moments when people misunderstood her, underestimated her, and looked only at her position instead of her character. Yet somehow, she never allowed those experiences to remove her compassion. One afternoon, while walking through the mansion garden, Damien asked Naomi why she still chose kindness after seeing how unfairly people could judge each other. Naomi looked at the flowers growing along the pathway and explained that pain could either become a wall that separated people or a bridge that helped them understand others better. She had chosen the second path. Her answer stayed with Damien because it revealed the difference between them. He had spent years protecting himself from the world, while Naomi had spent years protecting the goodness inside herself. Over the following weeks, Damien started noticing things he had ignored before. He saw how every person inside the mansion carried their own hopes, fears, and stories. He listened more. He judged less. And slowly, the people around him began seeing a side of him they never expected. Ethan noticed the change most of all. The young boy no longer saw his uncle as someone too busy with responsibilities. He saw someone willing to be present, someone learning how to express care instead of only providing protection. Naomi watched this transformation quietly. She never believed she changed Damien. She believed she simply reminded him of the kindness that was already hidden beneath years of distance. One evening, as the warm lights of Naples filled the windows, Damien admitted that before meeting her, he thought power meant never needing anyone. Naomi gently reminded him that even the strongest people need connection, because no one was meant to walk through life completely alone. In that moment, Damien understood why her presence felt different from anyone else he had known. She never tried to take anything from his world. She only added something it had been missing: peace. And as the mansion became filled with more laughter and understanding, everyone began realizing that Naomi's greatest gift was not what she did. It was who she inspired others to become. The evening that changed everything arrived quietly, without anyone inside the mansion realizing how important it would become. Damien Park, the Korean Mafia boss with white skin and a tattoo on his neck, hosted a special gathering in Naples that brought together many people from different parts of his world. The mansion was filled with polished floors, warm lights, and conversations between guests who believed they understood what success truly meant. For many of them, value was measured by reputation, wealth, and influence. But Damien had already learned a lesson that changed the way he looked at everyone around him. Naomi Carter entered the evening with the same calm confidence she always carried. The Black Maid was not trying to impress anyone or prove that she belonged. She understood that dignity was something a person carried within themselves, not something given by a room full of strangers. Some guests noticed only her position and failed to understand the quiet impact she had created inside the mansion. They did not know she was the reason Ethan smiled again. They did not know she was the person who helped Damien rediscover trust and compassion. Naomi noticed their assumptions, but she remained graceful because her kindness was never dependent on how others treated her. Across the room, Damien watched silently. He remembered the first night he met her and how he questioned why someone would help without expecting anything in return. Now he understood the answer. It was simply who she was. During the evening, Ethan proudly shared how Naomi had been the person who stopped to help him when nobody knew who he was. The conversations around the room slowly faded. Everyone began seeing the woman they had overlooked in a completely different way. The room went silent, not because Naomi demanded recognition, but because her actions revealed the truth louder than words ever could. Damien stepped forward and acknowledged what he had learned from her. He explained that real respect was not created by titles or appearances. It came from character, compassion, and the way people treated others when there was nothing to gain. Naomi stood calmly, the same person she had always been from the beginning. That was what affected Damien the most. She did not become valuable because powerful people finally noticed her. She had always been valuable. They were simply learning to see it. And on that night, inside a mansion once defined by influence, everyone discovered that true strength could come from the quietest heart in the room. After the night, when everyone finally recognized Naomi Carter's true value, something inside the mansion changed forever. The respect people showed her was no longer based on Damien Park's approval or connection. It came from finally understanding the strength she had carried since the beginning. The Korean Mafia Boss, with white skin and a tattoo on his neck, continued leading his world, but he was no longer the same man who once believed that distance was the only way to stay strong. He started seeing people beyond their positions, beyond their appearances, and beyond the assumptions others placed on them. The Black Maid had never asked him to change. She simply showed him another way to live. In the weeks that followed, Ethan noticed his uncle smiling more often and spending more time enjoying simple moments instead of only focusing on responsibilities. The mansion that once felt like a beautiful but silent building had become a real home. Naomi watched these changes quietly, grateful to see the happiness returning to the family. But deep inside, she wondered if her presence was still needed. She never wanted to stay somewhere because people felt they owed her something. She wanted every connection in her life to come from genuine respect. One evening, as the soft lights of Naples reflected through the mansion windows, Naomi told Damien that perhaps it was time for her to continue her own journey. Damien listened carefully, and for the first time, he did not react with fear of losing someone important. Instead, he understood what Naomi had been teaching him all along. Caring about someone meant respecting their choices. He told her that no matter where life took her, the impact she created would always remain. She had helped Ethan believe he mattered. She had reminded the people around her to treat others with kindness. And she had shown Damien that true leadership was not about standing above people, but standing with them. Naomi looked at the man in front of her and saw someone completely different from the guarded person she first met on that rainy night. He had not lost his strength. He had discovered a deeper version of it. In that quiet moment, they both understood that some people enter our lives not to change who we are, but to remind us of the best parts of ourselves that we forgot were still there. The days after Naomi Carter's decision brought a new understanding to everyone inside the mansion. She realized that leaving was not the only way to protect her independence, and staying did not mean she had forgotten who she was. The Black Maid had entered the mansion with nothing except kindness, honesty, and dignity, and those were the same qualities she continued to carry. Damien Park, the Korean Mafia Boss with white skin and a tattoo on his neck, no longer saw her as someone who simply helped his family during a difficult moment. He saw her as someone whose actions revealed the kind of strength many people searched their entire lives to find. Naomi chose to continue being part of their lives, not because of the mansion, the comfort, or the world Damien belonged to, but because the connection they created was built on respect. Ethan was the happiest to see that the person who had brought warmth back into their home was not disappearing from their story. The young boy understood something many adults forgot. Family was not only about a shared name. Sometimes it was created through the people who showed up when kindness mattered most. As months passed, Damien continued changing the way he approached the world around him. People who once knew him only as distant and serious began noticing patience, understanding, and humility. He still carried responsibility, but he no longer allowed responsibility to separate him from humanity. Naomi continued inspiring others without trying to lead them. She proved that influence was not always about being the loudest person in the room. Sometimes the greatest influence came from being the person who made others feel seen. One evening, as the three of them stood in the garden overlooking the lights of Naples, Damien remembered the rainy night when he first saw Naomi beside Ethan. Back then, he wondered what kind of person would help a stranger without expecting anything back. Now he finally knew the answer. It was someone who understood that compassion was never a weakness. Naomi looked at the peaceful home around her and knew that the biggest changes often started with the smallest choices. A single moment of kindness had connected 3 different lives and created something none of them expected. The mansion was no longer a symbol of what one person controlled. It became a reminder of what people could build when they respected each other. Years later, people in Naples still remembered the unexpected connection that began with one simple act of kindness on a rainy night. Naomi Carter never imagined that stopping to help a young boy would lead her into a world completely different from her own, and Damien Park never imagined that the person who would change his perspective on life would be someone he almost overlooked. The Korean Mafia boss with white skin and a tattoo on his neck had once believed that respect came from power and distance. He thought protecting himself meant hiding his emotions and trusting very few people. But the Black Maid showed him that real strength was not about creating walls. It was about having the courage to understand others and value the hearts behind their stories. Ethan grew older, carrying the lesson Naomi taught him from the first moment they met. He remembered that she did not ask who he was before deciding he deserved kindness. She did not look for importance before showing compassion. That memory became something he carried everywhere, reminding him to see people for their character before anything else. The mansion that once felt quiet and untouchable became a place known for warmth and respect. Damien continued to be a strong leader, but people saw a new side of him. They saw someone who listened, appreciated others, and understood that every person had value. Naomi remained the same humble woman she had always been. Recognition did not change her because she never needed recognition to know her own worth. She proved that dignity was something carried inside a person, not something created by titles or status. One evening, as the lights of Naples reflected across the city, Damien, Naomi, and Ethan stood together remembering how everything started. A moment most people ignored became the moment that transformed all of their lives. Damien looked back and understood that Naomi had not entered his world to become part of his power. She entered his world to remind him of his humanity. Her kindness created a change that continued far beyond one family, inspiring others to look deeper before judging what they saw on the surface. And that day, the world remembered what dignity looks like.